109. To the choir master, a psalm of David. Be not silent, O God of my praise, for wicked and deceitful mouths are open against me, speaking against me with lying tongues. They encircle me with words of hate and attack me without cause. In return for my love, they accuse me, but I give myself to prayer. So they reward me evil for good and hatred for my love. Appoint a wicked man against him, and let an accuser stand at his right hand. When he is tried, let him come forth guilty. Let his prayer be counted as sin. May his days be few, may another take his office. May his children be fatherless, and his wife a widow. May his children wander about and beg, seeking food far from the ruins that they inhabit. May the creditor seize all that he has, and may strangers plunder the fruits of his toil. Let there be none to extend kindness to him, nor any to pity his fatherless children. May his posterity be cut off. May his name be blotted out in the second generation. May the iniquity of his fathers be remembered before Yahweh. And let not the sin of his mother be blotted out. Let them be before Yahweh continually. May he that he may cut off the memory of them from the earth. He did not remember to show kindness, but pursued the poor and the needy, and the brokenhearted to put them to death. He loved to curse, let curses come upon him. He did not delight in blessing, may it be far from him. He clothed himself with cursing as his coat, may it soak into his body like water, and oil into his bones. May it be like a garment that he wraps around, that he wraps around him like a belt that he puts on every day. May this be the reward of my accusers from Yahweh, of those who speak evil against my life. But you, O Yahweh, my Lord, deal on my behalf for your name's sake, because your steadfast love is good. Deliver me, for I am poor and needy, and my heart is stricken within me. I am gone like a shadow at evening. I'm shaken off like a locust. My knees are weak through fasting. My body has become gaunt with no fat. I am an object of scorn to my accusers. When they see me, they wag their heads. Help me, O Yahweh, my God. Save me according to your steadfast love. Let them know that this is your hand. You, O Yahweh, have done it. Let them curse, but you will bless. They arise and are put to shame, but your servant will be glad. May my accusers be clothed with dishonor. May they be wrapped in their own shame as in a cloak. With my mouth I will give great thanks to Yahweh. I will praise him in the midst of the throng, for he stands at the right hand of the needy one to save him from those who condemn his soul to death. Whoa. Man, I've been mad at some people before, but I have never prayed anything like Psalm 109 for anybody. How can a disciple do this? So here's the question. How does David, a man after God's own heart, pray this for somebody? All right, the common answer to that is, well, he was just being honest with the Lord. It was an emotional outburst. It was extreme anguish, and God can handle our thoughts. That's true. That's very true, and that's a good answer to some things. But in Psalm 109, that doesn't go far enough. That kind of removes us from the details of the text and turns this into, some kind of journal entry or something like that. Look at the details of this thing, man. May his days be few and another take his office. Oh, okay, fair enough. May his children be fatherless and his wife a widow? You ever prayed that for somebody? I mean, maybe, but you ever felt good about praying that for somebody? You ever felt like you weren't going too far or sinning? Okay. May his children wander about and beg, seeking food far from the ruins they inhabit. My goodness. Okay, so not only did David pray this in a moment of emotional outburst, he wrote it down, he published it, and then he gave it to the choir master and said, here, sing this in public. That is an accurate representation of part of reality, and I'm not afraid to staple my name to this thing. Whoa. All right, what makes this make sense? How does a man after God's own heart pray that for somebody because he has been wronged by him? Well, I'll explain it like this. God has worked out his plan in history, and a lot of the Bible was written when his plan was not yet complete. And here's where I'm going with this, then I'll back up and explain it. Because we know the gospel and we have benefited from the gospel, it takes bitterness like this off the table for us. So we don't get to be bitter like that against people, and thankfully we don't have to be left in this kind of bitterness, we have a gospel solution to it. But at the time when David was writing this, I mean, you look at some of the betrayals that he faced, right? Like Ahithophel, who switched sides on him and tried to get his son to kill him and usurp the throne. That's pretty messed up. So when you're talking about multi-generational sin like that, a guy trying to undo your legacy, then what David is asking for is, hey, let the device of the wicked fall on his own head, like it says in Psalm 10 and before that in Psalm 7. Really what he's asking for is an eye for an eye. He's asking for justice, actual, perfect, earthly justice, and he's asking for God to do it. So look at this. Verse 16, he did not remember to show kindness, but pursued the poor and needy and the brokenhearted and put them to death. So here's what David's asking for. He loved to curse, let curses come upon him. He did not delight in blessing, so may blessing be far from him. He clothed himself with cursing as a coat, may it soak into his body like water, and oil into his bones. If you're into the essential oils thing, you know that there are essential oils you can rub on your skin to alleviate joint pain. You know, it sinks into your bones. That's what he's asking for. By the way, they had essential oils back then. That was just called medicine, right? So that's what he's referring to. May the cursing, may it be like a garment that he wraps around him, like a belt that he puts on every day. Okay, so what he's asking for is tit for tat, right? It's just actual mathematical, even-keeled justice. That's what he wants. Now, justice in this situation is pretty tough because this guy, whoever this was, whatever situation he was writing this about, this guy has done that kind of harm to David. So David's saying, God, let it circle back. You know, let it come back around to him. It's actually not that over the top. Now, you can see this, I think, in the fulfillment of this this passage, because in verse 8, there's a text that may be familiar to you. May his days be few and another take his office. That's picked up and quoted in Acts chapter 1 and applied to Judas. It's a prophecy of Judas. Peter's like, hey, this is, you know, Psalm 109 was actually prophesying about Judas. May his days be few and another take his office. Judas has now betrayed Christ the way this guy betrayed David, you know, the proto-Messiah in a lot of ways. And so we're going to now get another to take his office, and that's where they got Matthias to be the 12th apostle in Acts chapter 1. So the fulfillment of this shows you the level of betrayal that was happening, because how bad was the betrayal that Judas did to Jesus? It's the worst there's ever been. That is the biggest betrayal in world history. Now, you could find an equal one there with with what got Satan kicked out of heaven. So that would be in the spiritual realm. But in terms of like on earth, there's no worse betrayal ever than what Judas did to Jesus. And that's the kind of thing here that David is experiencing. So he's saying, let him have it, God. Give him what he deserves. Here's the thing. He's not wrong about what this guy deserves. He's not. He's not wrong about what justice would actually look like. But David, at that point on the timeline, had not yet seen the substitutionary work of Jesus. And so for him to ask for this kind of justice, that's how the world worked. But Jesus changed the world, right? When he showed up and he said, forgive them, Father, they don't know what they're doing, while they were killing him, that's a different level. David hadn't seen that before. For him to say, do not count it against them, but count it to my account. For him to become a curse for us, to be born under the law, perfectly fulfill the law, and then get crushed as though he broke the law, and to do that willingly, right? To be betrayed and then get counted as the betrayer. I mean, nobody had ever seen anything like that. That was completely new. And to do that on behalf of the people who did not deserve forgiveness. So David wasn't operating in a gospel category here. David is operating in a category of justice before Jesus showed us what it looked like to take the justice. So here's the thing. You and I, we don't get to pray all of Psalm 109 for people or over people. We don't get to pray this kind of imprecatory prayer. Now, there are definitely elements of it that we can pray. I think verses 1 through 5, all of us could pray at some point. Like, why have these guys wronged me? They've returned evil for my love, and so on. There's a lot here that we can glean from. But Psalm 109 is a package. The gospel took away our excuse to harbor that kind of bitterness. We don't get to anymore, right? So Paul says, in like Ephesians 4, for example, forgive one another as as God in Christ has forgiven you. That's now our approach. When our enemies wrong us, Jesus says, now you're going to turn the other cheek. That's what you're going to do, right? 1 Corinthians 6, Paul tells us, don't be suing each other. Why not rather be wronged? You're going to absorb it. Why? Because you were bought with a price. Think about what Jesus did for you. As we're looking for ourselves in Psalm 109, we're not David. There are times where we've been wronged and we felt like David, but David is not a type of us so much as he's a type of Christ, which means that we are his betrayers. We are his accusers. But while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So now we are disciples of Christ, not disciples of David. We're going to think in terms of how Christ deals with his enemies, not in terms of how David deals with his enemies. Here's the gospel. Here's the good news. The work of Christ frees us from that kind of bitterness. Can you imagine having to walk around like this all the time? I mean, a lot of us don't have to imagine. That's our normal. We hold on to that kind of bitterness, that kind of vitriol and emotion that against people, and it's exhausting. So when we see things like Christ, there's nobody like Christ. I should say it differently. When we see things like these elements of the gospel and what Jesus did for us, it delivers us from having to be stuck in this emotional hell from which David writes Psalm 109. So the good news of Psalm 109 is that because of what Christ has done, we don't have to pray Psalm 109 for people anymore. Christ forgives.